My name is Maya Bennett, and I am 31 years old. The first thing my younger sister said when I reached for the breadbasket was, "Leave that. You didn't put in $1 toward tonight." She said it clearly enough for every relative at the long table to hear. A few glasses paused halfway to lip. My father glanced at me, then chuckled as though the jab were nothing. "Let's not make a scene," he said, turning his attention back to my sister. I had spent 4 weeks negotiating that dinner, approved every seating chart, and put my own card down for the deposit. Yet no one at the table knew, because I wanted the night to feel like a gift, not a transaction. My sister believed my quiet meant I had nothing to say. She sat back with the pleased little smile she always wore when she thought she'd cornered me. I looked at the empty bread plate in front of me, then at the faces waiting to see if I'd argue. For years I had explained, absorbed, and paid without asking anyone to notice. That night I understood that explaining again would only hand them another chance to wave me off. So I nodded, folded my napkin, put on my navy coat, and walked out. In the lobby, I asked the event manager to pull my card from the final authorization. I was prepared to lose the deposit, but I wasn't going to underwrite one more minute of being talked down to. Minutes later, he carried the folio back into the private room. Through the glass wall, I watched my sister's smile drop as he told her. "The woman in the navy coat withdrew her payment and asked me to bring you this instead." Their faces went pale, but the bill was only where it started. Before I get to what happened after I walked out, and what my family found when they opened that folio, tell me, what time is it where you're reading this? Where are you tuning in from? And what's the weather like right now? I like knowing how far a story like this actually traveled. 4 weeks earlier, my mother Diane had called to say she wanted something special for her and my father's 35th wedding anniversary. Nothing extravagant, just family at a nice place. In our family, nothing extravagant never stayed that way for long. My father Richard suggested Harbor Point Manor, a private dining room at a lakeside inn where they'd gotten engaged decades before. My younger sister, Renee, announced in the family group chat within the hour that she'd handle all of it, then went quiet every time the venue coordinator asked about a deposit, a head count, or a signed contract. I just closed a big project at the marketing firm where I work, and I decided to fund the dinner as my gift to both of them. I didn't mention a number. I only told Renee the reservation was locked in and asked her to send me any allergy or seating notes by that Friday. She sent a thumbs up emoji, then posted publicly, "Don't worry everyone, it's all handled. Mom and Dad deserve this." Relatives replied with heart. My mother sent 3 crying laughing emojis of joy. I stared at my phone longer than I should have, wondering why it still stung to watch Renee collect praise for work she hadn't done. This wasn't new. When I was 17, I planned our grandparents' 40th anniversary party start to finish, and Renee told the whole family she'd basically run the thing. At my college graduation, she gave a toast about how she'd kept me grounded through school, though we'd barely spoken that year. Whenever I corrected the record, my mother said I was being touchy. Whenever I let it go, Renee treated my silence as an open door. Why did I keep hoping that paying for things would finally make people fair to me? I wish I had a noble answer. The truth was smaller and uglier than that. I still wanted my parents to look at me with the same easy pride they gave Renee. I wanted one family evening where nobody measured us against each other, corrected me, or turned my effort into proof that I was trying too hard. So I signed the contract, paid a $1,500 non-refundable deposit, and authorized my card for the estimated balance after service. The base package ran just under $7,000. Then Renee started making changes. She added a champagne tower, a raw bar upgrade, custom linens, and 4 guests I'd never met. Every time the coordinator copied me on an email, Renee replied first, "Approved. Maya's aware." I called the coordinator, a patient woman named Priya, and told her plainly that no additional charge could be finalized without my written sign-off. She apologized and flagged the file. I approved the linens for my mother and declined the rest. 2 days later Renee called. "Why are you making this complicated? They only turned 35 once." I told her she was welcome to cover any upgrades herself. She laughed. "You always make money so weird." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Renee wanted the authority of hosting without the cost of being the host. I kept the reservation anyway. I chose ivory and gold because those were my mother's wedding colors. Put together a short photo slideshow and arranged a car for my grandfather, whose knees had been giving him trouble. I even asked Priya not to announce who'd paid. "I don't want a toast about me," I told her. "This is for them." The night of the dinner, I arrived early in a navy dress and matching coat. Priya walked me through the final total, $8,200 including service, tax, and the linens I'd approved. My card would be charged after dessert. I signed the updated authorization and tucked the copy into my bag. Renee arrived 20 minutes later in cream, kissed our parents on both cheeks, and started rearranging the room like she owned it. She swapped place cards, complained the candles were too short, and told 2 cousins she'd worked herself to the bone, putting the night together. I heard every word and said nothing. Part of me was saving the truth for later. Part of me was still trying to protect my parents' anniversary from turning into another battleground. At dinner, Renee took the seat beside our mother and put me down near the far end of the table. When I quietly moved my place card back to the host's seat Priya had assigned me, Renee raised an eyebrow. "That one's for whoever put this together," she said. I met her eyes. "Are you sure that's the rule you want?" She smiled because she assumed I was bluffing. I sat down anyway. Through the first course she talked over me. Through the second, she accepted compliments about the venue like they were addressed to her. By the time the entree came out, she'd rewritten the whole evening with herself at the center, and our mother was helping her do it. Then I reached for the breadbasket, and Renee decided taking credit wasn't enough. She wanted to embarrass me too. "Leave that," she said, tapping the basket with one finger. "You didn't put in $1 toward tonight." She wasn't whispering. She wanted witnesses. The table went quiet, and I felt the old family instinct kick in. Everyone watching to see how gracefully I'd swallow it. My mother smiled into her champagne. "Renee's just teasing," she said, then added, "Let's be grateful to the people who actually showed up for us." I had arrived first. I had signed every document. I was sitting 3 seats away because Renee had moved my card. Still, my mother's words made me feel like I'd wandered in off the street. I asked her evenly, "Who do you think paid for tonight?" She looked startled that I'd answered at all. Renee jumped in before she could. "Please, you probably used Dad's credit card points and expect applause." A cousin studied his napkin. My aunt suddenly found something fascinating on her phone. My father examined the wine label like it held an exit route. I could have opened my bag and set the contract next to Renee's plate right there. I could have listed every call, every charge, every detail she'd claimed as her own. But a question stopped me. Proof was the only language they respected. Why was I still volunteering to pay for people who'd already decided my effort didn't count? I set down the breadbasket. "You're right," I said. Renee blinked. She'd been braced for an argument. I shouldn't eat something I didn't pay for. My mother gave a small, relieved laugh, thinking I'd folded. I refolded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and stood up. Renee's smile widened. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "I'm fixing the arrangement." I put on my coat and walked toward the lobby. Nobody followed me. That hurt more than the comment had, but it also made the next part easier. Priya was at the front desk reviewing service notes. I asked if the final charge had gone through yet. She said no. The authorization would convert after dessert. Told her to remove my card from the folio. She reminded me the deposit was non-refundable, and the remaining balance would come due from the party immediately. "I understand," I said. "Keep the deposit. Call it tuition." She hesitated. "Do you want me to tell them there's a payment issue?" "Tell them exactly what happened," I said. "The woman in the navy coat withdrew the payment and asked you to deliver the bill." Priya studied my face, then nodded. I was almost at the outer doors when I heard my father call my name from the dining room. I turned back through the glass. Priya was setting a black folio down beside Renee's plate. Renee's smile disappeared. My mother leaned toward Priya, confused. Priya repeated the line exactly as I'd asked. Even from the lobby I watched the color drain out of both their faces. Renee opened the folio, scanned the total, and snapped it shut. My father pushed back from the table and came toward me. "Maya, what did you do? Not what did they say to you. Not why are you leaving. What did you do?" I looked past him at the table. "I stopped paying for a dinner I was told I hadn't contributed to." He lowered his voice. "This is your mother's anniversary." "It was also my gift," I said. Renee rejected the gift in front of everyone. "I'm honoring her decision." Behind him, Renee stood, waving the bill. "This is insane. She can't just abandon us with this." Priya stayed composed. The host removed her payment method before settlement. "The outstanding balance is $82.16. Renee stared at her. "I'm the host." Priya opened her tablet. "The contract, deposit receipt, menu approvals, and card authorization are all under Maya Bennett." A murmur went around the table. Someone whispered, "I thought Renee paid for this." Someone else said, "That's what she told us." Renee's head snapped toward them. "I coordinated everything." Priya scrolled one. "The file shows Ms. Bennett coordinated the reservation. It also shows several upgrade requests from your email that were denied because you weren't financially authorized." Renee's face went red. My mother looked between Priya and me like the floor had tilted. "Maya, come back inside. We can talk about this privately." "You were comfortable embarrassing me in public," I said. "Why does the truth need privacy?" That was when my grandfather Walter set down his fork. He'd been quiet the whole night, but his silence wasn't like my father's. He'd been watching. "Before anyone asks Maya for anything else," he said, "Renee should explain why she took money from several people at this table for a dinner Maya already paid for." Renee froze. So did I. I'd known she was stealing credit. I hadn't known she'd been collecting cash. My grandfather pulled out his phone and set it beside the bill. On the screen was a message from Renee. "Send your share by Thursday. I'm covering most of it, but every bit helps." Under it, a transfer confirmation for $400. My aunt checked her own phone. Then my cousin. Within a minute, 3 relatives had found payments adding up to well over $1,000. Nobody was looking at me anymore. Every eye in the room had turned to Renee. She stared at the receipts like they'd materialized out of nowhere. "That money was for extras," she said. said. Flowers, the car service, tip, things I figured we'd need. Priya turned her tablet so the nearest relatives could read the itemized contract. The car service was paid directly by Ms. Bennett. The floral order is included in the venue total. Gratuity is included as well. My aunt asked where her $400 had gone. My cousin asked the same about his $200. Renee's answers contradicted each other in real time. First, the money was still sitting in her account. Then she'd spent it on a surprise. Then everyone had simply misunderstood her text. My grandfather raised one hand, and the room went quiet. There's nothing to misunderstand about send your share, he said. You let this family believe you were funding tonight. You humiliated the person who actually was, and you took money on top of it. Renee spun toward me, panic replacing her earlier confidence. Maya set this whole thing up. She knew exactly how this would look. I almost admired how fast she tried to turn my boundary into my conspiracy. I didn't know about the transfers, I said, but I did know you told the venue you were authorized to add charges. Priya nodded. There's one more thing. She pulled up an email chain. Anniversary program revision. That afternoon, Renee had asked the venue to reprint the dessert card to read with love from Renee and the family, asked the photographer to keep her position beside our parents in every formal shot, and told staff not to mention my name during any toast. The final line of her email read, Maya prefers to stay out of the spotlight. Something in me went very still. Renee hadn't just accepted misplaced credit. She'd engineered my disappearance. My mother read it twice. You told me Maya didn't want to be part of this, she said. Renee opened her mouth and nothing came out. My mother turned to me. Is that why you weren't giving a toast? Renee told me you wanted her to do it, I said. She said you thought I made everything about myself. My mother's face went tight. My father, no longer able to hide behind the wine label, finally spoke. Renee, pay the bill. Everyone was surprised by how flat his voice was. Renee laughed once, brittle. With what? I never agreed to $8,000. Neither did the relatives who sent you money believing they were helping cover it, my grandfather said. And yet you kept theirs. Renee pulled a card from her purse and handed it to Priya with a flourish meant to reclaim the room. Fine, charge it. Then everyone can stop acting like I committed a crime. Priya took it to the terminal. We waited. It declined. She tried a second card. That one declined too. Nobody laughed. The silence was worse. It stripped away the version of Renee everyone had spent years believing in, the capable one, the generous one, the one who always had it handled. My mother looked wrecked, but for once she didn't rush to shield her. You told me you'd paid for the venue, she said. You let me thank you in front of everyone. Renee's eyes welled up, but her voice stayed sharp. I was going to make it work. Maya always has money. She likes rescuing people. That sentence used up whatever sympathy was left at the table. I stepped back through the door, not to fix anything, but because I wanted Renee to hear this part clearly. I did like helping, I said. What I didn't like was being erased while you spent my money as proof of your own generosity. Renee's voice cracked. You're really going to leave them with this bill? I looked at my mother. No. Renee is. She claimed the dinner, took the credit, collected the contributions, and told me not to eat. Ownership comes with a price. My grandfather asked Priya to split out the upgrades Renee had requested from the base package. She explained the balance could be settled across several cards. My father covered part of it. My mother pulled from a savings account. A few relatives applied their earlier transfers only after Renee sent the money back to them first. She stood at the table making repayment after repayment while everyone watched her balance shrink in real time. She had to borrow the rest from my father, who told her flatly it would be tracked and repaid in monthly installments. Dinner continued because most of the food had already been served, but the celebration was over. Nobody asked Renee for a toast. The photographer dropped her requested shot list. The dessert card went back to the original wording I'd approved. Happy 35th, Mom and Dad. When Priya offered me a slice of cake, I said no thanks. I'd lost $1,500, but I'd gained something money couldn't buy. A clean answer. They hadn't misunderstood my effort because I'd explained it badly. They'd misunderstood it because my silence was convenient for them. As I left the second time, my mother followed me into the lobby. Please don't let this break the family apart, she said. I turned and asked her the question I'd been avoiding my whole life. Why is the family only broken the moment I stop absorbing the damage? She had no answer. I went home alone, but for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt done. The messages started before I got to my apartment. My father, your mother is crying. Renee, you humiliated me on purpose. My mother called 5 times, then sent a voice memo asking me to come back and end the night with some grace. I turned my phone off and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, there were over 30 messages in the family group chat. Renee had posted a long explanation claiming she'd collected the money planning to pay me back eventually. My grandfather replied with one line, then show us the transfer you're planning to make. She didn't answer. My aunt asked why the dessert card had been changed. My cousin shared a screenshot of Renee, telling him Maya barely helped, so I'm covering most of it. My mother asked everyone to stop hashing this out publicly. My grandfather wrote back, the deception happened in this group. Correction belongs here too. I didn't add a thing. For once the facts were doing the work without me. On Monday, Renee showed up at my office lobby unannounced, holding an envelope. I met her downstairs because I didn't want her anywhere near my coworkers. She pushed the envelope at me. Inside was a check for $1,500, my lost deposit. There, she said. We're even. I handed it back. We're not even. Money's the easy part. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, but her edge hadn't softened. What else do you want? An audience? A public execution? I want a public correction, I said. Tell the family I planned and funded the dinner. Tell them you collected money while pretending to pay for it yourself. Return everyone's contributions. Pay Dad back. And stop speaking for me. She looked at me like I'd asked for something monstrous. You want me to torch my own reputation? No, I want you to stop using mine to protect yours. She lowered her voice. Mom is never going to forgive you for this. That was when I understood she hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to restore the old deal. Offer a token. Let me absorb the blame for the fallout, and everyone moves on unchanged. I put the envelope back in her hand. Then Mom can make her own decision. Renee left without another word. 2 days later, my mother asked me to come to a family meeting at my parents' house. I agreed on one condition. Nobody would ask me to apologize for walking out. When I arrived, my grandfather was already there with a folder. My father sat next to my mother looking older than he had 2 weeks earlier. Renee took the chair across from me. My mother opened with the familiar speech about sisters and misunderstandings, and how one bad night shouldn't erase a lifetime of love. I listened until she said, Maya, you could have handled it privately. I tried private for years, I said. Every time Renee took credit, or embarrassed me, or rewrote what happened, you told me to let it go. Privacy didn't fix anything. It just protected it. My father stared at the floor. My mother started to defend herself. But my grandfather opened his folder. Inside were printed email, the transfer screenshots, an old group chat. One from my college graduation where Renee had told relatives she'd paid for my celebration dinner, which I'd paid for myself. Another from a family trip where she'd claimed I'd bailed last minute, when in fact she'd given me the wrong departure time and used my absence to call me unreliable. My grandfather had asked relatives to send him example, and the pattern ran 19 pages. Renee's expression changed with every page. This wasn't one dinner she could wave off as a misunderstanding anymore. It was a history. My father finally spoke. I knew some of this, he admitted. Not the money, but the way you two got treated differently. I stayed quiet, because every conversation about it felt exhausting. I looked at him. Your silence was a choice. It just made things easier for Renee and harder for me. He nodded slowly. My mother started crying, but I didn't move to comfort her. It had been another role I performed on autopilot. Renee asked, so what happens now? My grandfather answered before I could. You repay what you owe. You correct the record. And until trust is rebuilt, you don't manage family money, reservations, or events. My mother looked startled. Renee looked furious. Organizing family occasions had been her throne for years, and losing it stung worse than the declined cards had. My father agreed. After a long pause, my mother did too. Renee looked at me, waiting for me to soften it. I didn't. Getting even, I realized, wasn't the moment her card got declined. It was the moment the family stopped asking me to protect her from the truth. Renee took 4 days to post the correction, and it wasn't graceful. She wrote something vague about high emotions and miscommunication and assumptions made about the evening. My grandfather replied to her privately. She deleted it and tried again. The second version was shorter and honest. Maya planned the dinner, paid the deposit, authorized the reservation, chose the menu, arranged the car, and approved the decorations. I let everyone believe I was the host. I also collected money without telling her and used her silence to look generous. What I said at the table was cruel and wasn't true. I'm returning the money and paying back what others covered. I read it twice, waiting for the old urge to jump in and reassure her. It never came. Relatives responded with careful, restrained messages. Nobody piled on, but nobody rushed to erase the consequences either. My aunt asked for repayment by Friday. My cousin said he needed some space. My father set up a written repayment schedule. My mother took Renee off the family event account and handed the finances to an outside bookkeeper, something that should have happened years earlier. The fallout wasn't dramatic, but it was thorough. Renee lost the story, the money, and the role that had made her feel untouchable. A week later, my mother came to my apartment alone. She was carrying the anniversary cake topper Priya had saved after that night. She set it on my counter and said, I owe you an apology without asking you to make me feel better about it. That was the first sentence she'd said in years that actually landed. She admitted she'd favored Renee because Renee needed the attention, while I always seemed like I could handle myself. You made capable look effortless, she said. I took that as permission to give you less. I told her capable was never the same as needing nothing. I'd needed her to defend me. I'd needed her to ask one question before believing Renee. I'd needed her not to smile while I was being humiliated. My mother cried quietly. This time I handed her a tissue, but I didn't tell her everything was fine. I love you, I said. That doesn't mean we're back to normal. Normal is what hurt me. We agreed to get coffee once a week and stop using family gatherings as a substitute for actually repairing things. My father called separately and apologized for treating avoidance like neutrality. I told him what I told him in the lobby. Silence picks a side when only one person benefits from it. He and my mother started seeing a counselor together, which mattered to me more than any speech could have. Renee didn't reach out for almost a month. During that stretch, Priya emailed me a document I'd never seen. A draft toast Renee had sent to the venue staff in advance. In it, she planned to thank our parents for teaching her that the people who really contribute never need recognition, then announced that she'd personally saved the night after I got too busy with work to help. It was deliberate, polished, and timed to land right before dessert. I forwarded it to my grandfather, my mother, and my father with no comment. My mother called Renee immediately. I didn't hear the conversation, but I found out later she'd canceled a planned weekend trip with her and told her they wouldn't be close again the way they used to be until Renee actually reckoned with the pattern. That was the loss Renee feared most. She was no longer the daughter whose motives got the benefit of the doubt. When Renee finally asked to meet, we picked a public cafe. She came without an envelope, an excuse, or sunglasses. I read the toast again, she said. I don't recognize the person who wrote it. I do, I said. I've known her a long time. She winced but didn't argue. She admitted my promotion had set something off in her. She'd been struggling financially and had built her whole identity around being the impressive one. Instead of admitting she was scared, she tried to make me small instead. I figured if everyone saw you as selfish, I'd still look like I mattered, she said. I asked if she was sorry she'd hurt me, or sorry the plan hadn't worked. She sat with that for a while. Both, she finally said. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was a true one. I told her I wasn't ready to forgive her and might never trust her with money or my reputation again. She nodded. What can I do? Change when nobody's watching, I said. And stop treating access to me like proof that you have. We left separately. No hug. No swelling music. No instant fix. That made it more real than every family promise we'd made before it. 6 months later, my mother invited me to a small dinner at the same inn. My first instinct was to say no. Then she sent the reservation confirmation, the paid receipt, and a guest list with no surprises on it. You don't need to plan anything, her message said. You just need to decide if you want to be there. That distinction mattered. I went. When I arrived, Renee was already seated, but she hadn't touched the place card, the menu, or the seating chart, because there was no seating chart to touch. The dinner was simple, already paid for, and deliberately unremarkable. My mother and father had put it together themselves. My grandfather sat at the head of the table with the quiet look of a man who understood that real progress is a lot less impressive than performance, but worth far more. Renee greeted me politely. No dramatic apology. Over those months, she'd repaid every relative and made 3 payments to my father. She'd also stepped back from managing family events entirely and started seeing a therapist. I knew all of this because my mother mentioned it in passing, not because Renee used it to angle for forgiveness. That difference mattered too. Partway through the meal, a serving dish landed between Renee and me. For one long second, I remembered her finger tapping the breadbasket, telling me not to touch. Renee remembered it too. She slid the dish toward me. You first, she said. It was small. I didn't mistake it for transformation, but I accepted it and filled my plate without apologizing for it. Later, my mother stood to give a toast. She thanked my father for putting the dinner together, my grandfather for insisting on honesty, and Renee for finally taking responsibility. Then she looked at me. I used to praise Maya for being strong, when what I really meant was that I expected her to manage without help. I was wrong. Her generosity was never owed to us, and her boundaries were never a punishment. The room stayed quiet, but it wasn't the old silence that erased me. It was one that made room for the truth. She didn't ask me to respond. She just raised her glass. That restraint was its own kind of apology. After dinner, Renee found me by the windows near the lobby. I know we're not fit, she said. I also know I spent years making you smaller because I was scared of feeling small myself. I told her understanding why didn't undo the damage. I know, she said. I'm going to keep doing the work anyway. I believed she meant it in that moment. I also knew believing her didn't require trusting her yet. We walked back to the table separately. The family never went back to the old version of normal. Renee stopped being treated as the automatic authority. My father stopped disappearing the second a conversation got uncomfortable. My mother started checking facts before defending anyone. I stopped funding celebrations to earn affection, stopped laughing off comments that were really insults, and stopped explaining boundaries to people who decided in advance to misunderstand them. Some relatives called me colder now. My grandfather called me clearer. He was right. Clarity didn't make me cruel. It just ended the tradition of treating my discomfort as the price everyone else paid for their own comfort. The night Renee told me I shouldn't eat because I hadn't put in $1, she expected me to defend the cost of my own plate. Instead, I stopped funding the entire performance. The bill exposed her lies, but the real consequence went further than that. She lost the cover that had let those lies survive for so long. I didn't get even by wrecking her life. I got even by refusing to keep keep building hers out of my silence. Forgiveness, if it ever fully comes, will be earned slowly, and mostly in private. Respect came first. And every time I think back to walking out in that navy coat, I don't think about the $1,500 I lost. I think about the part of myself I finally stopped handing away for free. So tell me honestly, if someone in your own family took credit for everything you'd sacrificed, humiliated you in front of everyone, and still expected you to keep footing the bill, would you forgive them the moment they apologized? Or would you make them prove they'd actually changed before you let them back in? We hope this story gave you something to sit with. This is a work of fiction, written for entertainment and reflection. If it reminds you of anything, let it be this. When someone takes your presence for granted, your absence might become the lesson they never saw coming. But the real win was never their regret. It was your own freedom.